This video is to explain what the divorce of ownership and control means. When in theory of the firm we're looking at public limited companies, we saw in the last video how an example of that is Tesco. So Tesco PLC is a public limited company, and Tesco is owned by shareholders. So let's imagine here that this shareholder owns 1% of all of the shares, this one owns 2% of all of the shares. They may or may not have a right to dividends as well if the company makes a profit. And the shareholders we call the principals, or the principal if it's one shareholder. And then within Tesco, you've also got people who work for Tesco. So the people who are managing things day to day and how the business operates, you've got executive directors, so they're being paid like employees. Also, you have managers. And these people we consider to be agents of the business. So the shareholders are principals and the people working for Tesco and running it are agents. And this is where we have this problem of our divorce, our separation of the ownership, which is with the shareholders. So they have ownership up here. Whereas the agents have control over what's happening in the business. And this can pose a problem because the principals might want something different from the agents within the business. It's likely that the people who own the shares, the shareholders, they want to maximize the profits in the business, because if they see that the profits are being maximized, this will increase the demand for the shares, and we know that if the share demand goes up, that will increase the share price. And then they'd be able to sell their shares and they'd be able to make money out of that, make a profit on the shares that they have. The other thing for shareholders, the reason they'd want to maximize profits is to receive a dividend. And remember, a dividend is a share of the profits that the company makes. So the more profit that Tesco makes, the more dividends these shareholders are likely to receive. So overall, the business will be operating, going along, and the shareholders will want to be maximizing the profits in the business so that their share price can go up and hopefully they can receive a dividend. And the bigger the profit, the bigger the dividend. One caveat to that, one exception, is firms which are PLCs which don't pay dividends. There are some of those, like ASOS, for example. So this is what the principal, the owners, the shareholders, all of them, that's the same thing. They want to maximize profits. However, some of the agents might have different objectives, and this is where we have this separation of the ownership and the control. If, for example, you are a sales director in this business, in Tesco, it might say that your pay is linked to the sales that are made by Tesco. And therefore, the more sales that are made by Tesco, the more this sales director is going to be paid. So this will mean that their main aim is to maximize sales in the business. And when you maximize sales, you might not actually end up maximizing profits. So an example of this might be, for example, you increase advertising. If you increase advertising, you've got to pay for it. That will increase the costs for the business. And we know that the way that you work out whether a business is making profit, you look at all the money that comes in from your sales, your revenue, and you take away your costs. And in this case, every time you sell something, yes, you're increasing your revenue. However, if your costs are very high because you're advertising a lot to let people know about your business, and that's the way that you're maximizing your sales, you might find that your costs get very, very high and your profits might not be as much as they could be. So this is just one example of why an agent within the business might have a very different outlook and a different objective to the principal. And this can be a problem within an organization because the shareholders in the business don't have the same objective as the executive directors and the managers. Just to say, one way that you can actually align the interests of the shareholders and the agents is to pay them partly in shares in the business or options over shares. And what this means is that the agents, they don't just receive money for their work, but they get shares in the company. And if they have shares in the company, they're going to be a shareholder, and they will also want to maximize profits. They will no longer just be looking at whatever it says in their contract about their pay. The other thing, an option over a share, that's a bit more complicated, but that's where part of your pay, you're told that at a future date, you will be able to buy a certain amount of shares at a certain price. So you might be able to buy them in 3 years' time at 5p each. If you work hard to increase the profits and the success of the business, you will find that the share price will go up. You'll still only have to pay that small amount for each share, but now they might be worth a lot more, and that would be in your interests. So that would be a way to align the interests of the shareholders and the agents. This last section isn't on your specification, but it's just something quite helpful to know, and it might be good for evaluation.